Hi guys, and thank you so much for joining me. If you are new to my channel, I'm Kat and I like to talk about true crime, conspiracies and all sorts of related things. Today let's talk about the case of Margaret Hogg. But before we get started, just a quick disclaimer. I don't mean to be disrespectful to anyone I talk about in today's video. The video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. All the information that I give you is from the public domain. Thank you so much. Now let's get into it. Margaret Hogg was a manslaughter victim whose body was preserved in Wast Water, Lake District National Park, Cumbria for 8 years. Wast Water is England's deepest lake. Margaret Hogg had worked as an airline stewardess and her husband, Peter Hogg, was a pilot. He was 19 years older than she was. He achieved front page news on 16th of August 1974 when he landed at Luton Airport as the captain of a Lockheed L-1011 Tristar of Court Line that he piloted overnight from a refuelling stop at Gander, Canada, bringing Clarksons holidaymakers back from Santa Lucia. This was the airline's last flight as Court Line had ceased trading the previous day. Margaret had a 3-year affair with banker Graham Ryan and often flaunted it before Peter. In October 1976, she attacked her husband, hitting and kicking until he grabbed her around the neck and squeezed hard. She suffocated and he wrapped her body in a carpet, tied it to a block of concrete, drove north overnight from Surrey in Wast Water Lake in the Lake District National Park. The body settled at a depth of 34 meters, 110 feet, only a short distance away from much deeper parts of the deepest lake in England. Due to the lack of oxygen, the body didn't decompose, but over time was preserved by the formation of adipocere, also known as grave wax, which is essentially a waxy or greasy decomposition product formed by hydrolysis and hydrogenation of tissue fats. Once formed, it appears stable for extended periods. Adipocere has generally been considered to result from bacterial action, commonly in warm, damp, anaerobic environments. In 1983, the lake was searched for the body of Veronique Mirel Mar, a missing French student. It was then that the remains of Margaret Hogg were found tied in the fetal position with coax cable with a dry cleaning bag over her head and the body wrapped in a hessian cover by a diver, Neil Preet, on 29th of February 1984, who initially believed them to be just a roll of old carpet. Shortly after the recovery, the body was identified by friends. The police investigation was made easier by noting Margaret 111163 Peter that was engraved on the inside of the gold wedding ring recovered on the floor of the mortuary at West Cumberland Hospital. Peter Hogg, the prime suspect, initially denied the murder before making a confession. He was sentenced to 4 years for manslaughter, obstructing a coroner and perjury in his divorce proceedings. 4 years for manslaughter. The body of Veronique Mirel Mar was eventually found in April 1984. Her remains were found on a mountain at the bottom of a cliff, but no cause of death could be officially given. Margaret Hogg, who died in October 1976, became known as the Wasdale lady in the lake. Mrs. Hogg met her 19-year-older husband and killer, Peter Hogg, while working as an airline stewardess for Air Europe, where Peter Hogg was a pilot. They married, but over time the marriage turned sour. Eventually, Margaret had a 3-year affair with American banker Graham Ryan, before Peter strangled her in October 1976 during one of their frequent fights. He wrapped her body in a carpet, tied it to a block of concrete, and dumped the body in Wast Water Lake in the Wasdale Valley in the Lake District National Park, England. Now, let's deep dive in, shall we? Margaret was less than discreet about her affair and spent the week prior to her disappearance on Sunday 17th of October 1976 with her lover at a cottage in Dorset. Peter reported his wife's disappearance to the police and told officers that he suspected his 37-year-old wife had run away with Ryan. He eventually obtained a divorce. Mrs. Hogg has been described by friends as friendly and extrovert, while Peter was more introverted. In July 1983, 21-year-old Veronique Mirel Mar vanished. She was an agricultural student from Paris who was staying at Wasdale Youth Hostel in the Lake District. She had left a local pub and was last seen heading towards Wast Water. Police frogmen searched the 4-mile-long lake but couldn't find any trace of the girl. In February of the following year, an amateur diver, Neil Pritt, was exploring the icy waters of the lake when, at a depth of 100 feet, he noticed a bundle lying on a ledge. The police were summoned and their divers brought the bundle to the surface. When they opened the bundle, they knew that the half-naked body was not that of the young French girl. This body was that of a middle-aged woman. The corpse was wearing a plain gold wedding ring. On the inside of the wedding ring, however, was inscribed Margaret 11-1163, Peter. Mrs. Gillian Seddon read in the newspaper the report of the discovery and contacted the police. She had once been employed as housekeeper to the Hoggs and knew the date of their marriage. Peter Hogg, by then 57-year-old, was traced to Mid Road, Cranley, and on 4th of March 1984, he was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. At his trial at the Old Bailey, he pleaded not guilty. His defense was one of provocation, stating that he had quarreled with his wife and, after some mutually inflicted violence, he accidentally strangled her. Realizing what he had done, he bundled the body in some plastic sheets and an old carpet, bound it with wire, and driven the next night to Wast Water. Here he took the body out in a rowing boat and tipped it over the side, weighed down with a concrete block. If Peter Hogg had rowed just a few yards further before dumping his wife's body, he would probably have never been caught, as the body would have missed the ledge it landed on and plunged to the bottom of the lake. Considerable evidence was presented about Margaret's affair with Graham Ryan, and the sympathetic jury returned a verdict of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment. But fate was sometimes smiling on Peter Hogg. After his early arraignment, he was granted £20,000 bail, unusual for those facing a murder charge. And after an Old Bailey jury found him guilty of manslaughter and not murder, he was jailed for a mere 4 years, serving 3 years in an open prison. The Wasdale that he went to that dark October night was well known to Peter Hogg because between 1941 and 1945 he was a boarder pupil at Keswick School, and he returned to the lakes several times from the south of England. At the Old Bailey, Peter Hogg denied murdering his wife. His counsel told the jury that Hogg was provoked for years by the unfaithful and bad behavior of his wife. He claimed Margaret Hogg flaunted her affair with another man. Patrick Beck, Queen's counsel, said she was a piece of erring humanity. The tabloid press had a field day describing Mrs. Hogg as a cow in trial reports. The Queen's counsel said his client's main defense was provocation. Quote, "The law recognizes that within every human being lies the fires of emotion, and you can provoke a human being just so far." End of quote. He said this provocation lasted years, with Mrs. Hogg flaunting her affair to all and sundry. Graham Ryan, the other man in Mrs. Hogg's life, told the court they had been away together in Dorset the week before Mrs. Hogg died. Her return from this trip sparked off the fatal row. Describing that fateful night, Hogg was asked, "Had you murdered your wife?" He replied, "Murder is not the right word. Certainly she died. I think I strangled her. We had an argument. She did her usual act. She was always throwing things at me." Describing the row, he said, "She was scratching my face, kicking me in the crotch, and I belted her. She flew at me, hitting and kicking. Then I grabbed her around the neck and squeezed hard. I realized one of her eyes had glazed and I let go. She fell back on the floor and I realized she was dead. Hogg was described in court as cool and calculating in the minutes after the strangling. He changed his clothes and trussed up the body before working out how to dispose of it. Describing his drive north and rowing an inflatable boat out onto the pitch black lake, he said, "It was the longest night of my life. You don't realize how difficult it was. I nearly went in with her." He told the court, "I was in a perfectly logical frame of mind once I had recovered from my initial horror, from my original horror. Possibly after my 30 years training, I put my mind to dealing with the current emergency." So, he reported his wife as missing to Surrey police a month later. It took the jury just over an hour to find Hogg not guilty of murder. He was jailed for 3 years for manslaughter and another year was added for obstructing a coroner and to perjury in divorce proceedings. That was a very bad moment, Peter Hogg said in a BBC interview after the verdict was handed down. "I was taken completely by surprise. Although I had it very much on my mind for the first few years, towards the end of the 8 years, it receded more and more into the past." Hogg, who admitted strangling his wife, then 37 years old, during a furious row about her lover, recalled, "She came at me like a tiger, scratching, kicking and punching. After that, I had to make a decision as to whether to bring in the authorities or try to cover the matter up," said Hogg. "I was left in the position of being in a fairly strange town, with no real friends around or very close relatives to help, with 2 very young children to bring up. I felt at the time, rightly or wrongly, if I brought the police in, for instance, they might have been taken away and I'd be taken away, and who knows when it ever would have been sorted out." Judge Thomas Pygott said he gave Hogg a minimum 4-year term for the manslaughter of his wife because of his exemplary character and his glowing testimonials to his qualities as a man and a father. "His crimes have been entirely out of character and I intended to impose the minimum sentence that was proper," the judge said. Margaret's ashes had been scattered on Wast Water, her family's wishes, after her body was cremated at Distington. When Deputy Coroner John Taylor opened an inquest in Whitehaven, he heard from a Home Office pathologist that death was from strangulation, and also from a Herefordshire dentist that the dentures belonged to Margaret Hogg. Former merchant worker Colin McCourt, a member of the Solway Diving Club, said, "I remember thinking what a scene it must have been. Wast Water is a particularly desolate spot in winter with a dark crease on far side of the lake. So imagine somebody rowing out there probably as darkness was falling and just as the sun was going down, so there was still enough light to see where he was going and what he was doing. Also imagine someone rowing out and trying to tip a dead body in a sack with a heavy curbstone tied to it and trying to roll it off the inflatable. People still say you would never have found the body if it hadn't dropped onto a ledge, but we had previously moved it on the ledge before the police removed it. The actual resting place was 36 meters on the bottom of the lake and we were led to believe it had been in the lake for a number of years." Both the Egremont and Solway frogmen were using Wast Water for diving and lifting exercises. Our understanding was that this package had been seen for many years. You couldn't tell what it wasn't like a body. We never opened many packages underwater because it was not unusual to find dead dogs or cats. We located this particular package at 36 meters, which meant we had under 20 minutes diving time. This day was particularly cold when we went down. I remember the package was tied to a concrete block. We lifted it up to a higher level, decided to leave it and go back. It was Neil Preet who went to tell the police who were searching for Veronique at the time. We knew it couldn't be her because the sack had been seen long before she went missing. Colin's diving record read, and I quote, "It was a nice calm day. We actually went looking for the package in a lifting exercise. We lifted it but never opened it. Perhaps next time." I added later, "No next time, female body found." When they found Margaret Hogg's body at the chilly bottom of England's deepest lake, 8 years after being dumped there by her husband, she was still wearing mascara. Strangled in her Surrey bedroom after a fight, driven hundreds of miles in the boot of the family car, and finally dumped in 260 feet of murky Lake District water, Margaret's mascara was obviously a really long-lasting one and waterproof. It was details such as this that made her murder at the hands of Peter, the pilot, sound like a gruesome advert for mascara. In fact, Margaret's murder was an ad for killing your wife, at least back in the late 70s. Then, if a man was suave and a bit emotionally wounded and his wife's life easily interpreted as slutty, murdering her was seen as a reasonable course of action. Peter Hogg believed he was hard done by when he got 3 years for murdering Margaret, as did so many people in his hometown in Cranley. As a journalist explained in A Very British Murder, some people were quite pleased. He as good as got away with it. And before you assume that such an attitude is peculiar to Surrey, consider that the murderer of Carol Ann Park was still at large more than 20 years after her body was found, and she was from Barrow-in-Furness. Carol had extramarital relationships and wouldn't go anywhere without her hairdryer, so when she obviously vanished, she was only ever classified as a missing person, not as a probably dead person. 21 years after she had gone missing, she turned up with her face caved in with an axe at the bottom of a lake. Her husband was eventually charged with her murder, but he maintained his innocence and ended his life while still in prison. So yeah, Peter Hogg, who got 3 years in an open prison for killing his wife. He wasn't charged for murder, he was charged for manslaughter. In that age, in that day and age, it seems that because he was so soft and kind, and he was the Peter the pilot, and you know, his wife cheated on him, the jury felt sympathetic. They were thinking probably she deserved it. The judge was sympathetic that he had an exemplary behavior, and they just gave him 3 years in prison. Oh, just like that. Go on, you know, sit there for 3 years, reflect, and get out. You'll be fine. Everybody's going to be fine. Oh, you just killed your wife by mistake. Because, like the council was saying, there's just so much a man can take before he explodes. Oh my god. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please do let me know in the comments below if you've ever heard of this case below. Also, I have decided I would like to focus my videos on covering less covered cases in the media. So please, if you have anything in mind, any particular case, do let me know down in the comments below. You can also send me an email. My email address is in the About section of the YouTube channel. You can also find me on my Facebook page. I'm mostly active on my Facebook page and also on my YouTube channel. Either way, again, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm. The more engagement the video gets, the more YouTube will be pushing it on the platform, and the more people will get the chance to see it. Thank you again so much, guys. Take care and stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.